Hear you. I see it looks like you're talking, but
all right. Hello, everyone. Get started here in a second.
Okay, now you should hear me, right?
thank you.
Okay, just rejoined the session, so let me try to share again. Yeah, that was not exactly how I was hoping this will work out, but we get that running. Sorry for the delay. Okay, now we're ready to start. Now you see my screen and you hear me. That's great. So I was already saying welcome, but you didn't hear me. So welcome again, everybody. I'm Mia Kulevind. I'm the IAB chair, and Tommy Pauly is co-chairing with me today.
Hello, everyone.
Good. As we already lost 3 minutes, let's start right away. This is an IAB session, but it's also part of the IAB meetings. So everything you say here is also part of the usual Node WAL and IPR coverage. It's not only about IPR, there's also some links here about, for example, code of conduct. So if you're not aware of these documents, please have a look at them. and study them. With that, we start quickly looking at our agenda today. This is the first time we're having such an IAB Open meeting. So we have planned 10 minutes for a little welcome and some updates and some introductions about what we're planning to do with this meeting. And then we want to talk mostly about technical and architectural work the IAB is doing in terms of documents, workshops, and programs. And at the very end, we have a little bit of time, hopefully, for a little open mic. The idea here is to specifically look at or have some discussion about how you found this meeting or what you would expect from future kind of IAB Open meetings. So what is this all about? Why do we have this meeting? The idea here is to really focus on technical and architectural aspects of the work that the IAB is doing. And the goals is to, on the one hand, increase visibility of what we're doing to the community, to increase transparency, but also kind of promote the work we're doing. But on the other hand, also to collect feedback and input from the community. So we can have a more interactive way of connecting to the community and get more direct input from you, rather than just discussion on mailing lists. Again, I said this already, this is like focusing on the technical and architectural work the IAB is doing. Everything that is more administrative or process related, usually we report back on, for example, the administrative plenary. Also related, you can always send comments or any kind of input and feedback directly to the IAB using the IAB@IAB.org mailing list. But we also have the architecture discuss mailing list, which is like an open mailing list everybody can join. And you, the community, or we together can have discussions related to architecture topics. So we use this mailing list also to announce when we're working on IAB documents, when we're going to plan to adopt or at least discuss the adoption of a new IAB document, or when we collect feedback of these documents, for example. So that's an open list to join. If you are interested in specific topics that is related to a certain IAB program, usually there's also an open mailing list for each program that you're able to join and provide feedback there. Then I would like to take the opportunity and quickly report back a little bit before we start with the rest of the agenda on the IAB virtual retreat we had. I wrote a blog post about this, and the link is at the very bottom of this slide. The reason why I would like to report back is because usually at the retreat, we have a lot of topics also which are more related to kind of housekeeping, processing, and so on, some technical topics as well. But this time also because we had this architectural because we had this virtual meeting, we had like actually a chance to differently organize our meetings. We had only very few meetings where we were all together, but we're organizing ourselves into various breakout sessions. So we took the opportunity to, before the IAB retreat, think a little bit more broadly about strategy, about trends, challenges, make a little survey between us to get input from us as a group. And then based on that, we created a couple of breakout groups discussing the topics listed here on the screen. So as you can see, some of the topics were related to the current situation, but also other technical factors and more strategic points as well. Okay, so let's start with the first part of our agenda that we were interested in, which is focusing on documents. Currently, we don't have any active IAB documents which are kind of not really ready yet. We have the draft IAB for the users, which is already in the RFC editing queue. And we see a little bit of a presentation about this next. And we have the data report, which is still an IAB document, but that's a workshop report. It's not like any architecture guidance or anything like that. There, if you look at the data tracker and you search for the IAB stream, you see a bunch more documents. There are documents related to IANA, to IESR, and things that we also publish on the IAB streams, which are not listed here because, as I said, this is really to focus on the technical work we're doing. There are also a couple of recently published documents I'm just put on the slide here because this is the first time we have this kind of meeting. So in the last year, And there was, for example, RFC 8546 on the wire image of network protocol. Related to that, there's also the protocol transfer protocol path signals, RFC 8558. And there was another workshop report if you're interested in that. Then we come actually for the draft. We have Mark hopefully here as the main author, reporting a little bit on this one. Now we can hear you.
Okay, that's a good start. Yeah, so draft IAB for the users is a document, if you recall. The abstract is here. It explains why the IA believes that when there's a conflict between the interest of end users of the internet and other parties, IETF decisions should favor end users. And it also explores how this can be more effectively achieved. So this started a while back in August 2015 as an individual draft, adopted by the IESG the middle of last year, and then approved earlier in this year after a few rounds of community review. And the community review gave us some really good input, making sure we more clearly identified the document as suggestions from the IAB rather than IETF consensus or something that was sourced from the entire community. And also to expand the suggestions of how to better represent user needs. So there's actually a fair amount of detail in the document with suggestions about how the IETF can more effectively consider the needs of end users in its deliberations. And so that's the really brief summary. It's in the RFC editor queue. It's been there for a while, so hopefully we'll see it get assigned a number and be published fairly soon. I think the only open question on this one is, are there any next steps that we might take in terms of following the thoughts of that document or expanding upon it? It talks about, for example, the current body of knowledge we have around privacy and other things that are principles we use to guide our decisions that might impact users. Do we need more of those? And I think that's an open and ongoing discussion. But if it's something that folks have interest in, it's something you might consider bringing to the IAB. That's all I got. Mary, did you want to do discussion or just an update?
So we would have a few minutes for discussion if people have questions.
Okay.
But I don't see anybody on the queue, so we can also just move on.
And I don't sing, so that sounds great. Oh, there was a queue.
Yeah. So Linda, you're now on audio, I think.
Okay, can I say something? I'm curious, this internet for end user, what does it mean? It has been used for end users since day one, so what is special here?
It is trying to establish how we consider the end user needs and to what degree we consider end user needs in making decisions, especially when they're in conflict with other stakeholders. So I'd encourage you to read the draft if you haven't already.
Okay.
Yes, Dan, it is very dark and late here. Okay.
Okay, now we have more people on the queue.
This is Bernie Henneisen speaking. A question about this end user thing. I apologize that I didn't join earlier session, but does this also involve some stuff on the end user side that the IETF has so far not been approaching, like user interface issues and this kind of stuff? What we need to do to help the end user to better understand what's actually going on in the wire?
No, the draft doesn't directly address expanding the scope of the IETF's work or you know, our considerations of what we're good at and what we're not. I think user experience is something that in the past, generally we've had a lot of reticence to dive into for a lot of good reasons. The few places where I've seen the IETF attempt something are where there are overriding security concerns. That's something that occasionally happens, but it doesn't delve into these areas in any depth.
follow-up, especially the security-related things that the user needs to be made aware of, and that the user needs to actually better understand what he's doing and what he's clicking. Is this something the IAB has on the agenda somewhere?
Not currently, no. It's certainly, I think, something that I'm interested in, a number of other people are interested in, but it's not something that's a current area of discussion. It's also an area, frankly, that there's expertise in a number of other places besides the IETF, and other places that might be closer to those decisions that are being made that have those effects.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have Yari.
Yeah, I was on the queue for the next item, so.
Ah, okay, that's even better. So let's move on. So let me see if I can change to the next slide. There we are. Okay, so as I said, this is what our current scope of IAB documents is. So the next part we want to look in is workshops. And we take the opportunity to report out on one of the workshops we have done last year, which is the data workshop. And then we would also like to announce a new workshop we're planning for November, all virtual, of course. And both is, I think, Yari reporting here.
Yeah, thank you. And since this first one is simply calling for review of the report, I'll take it very briefly and just use this slide. So we had a workshop last year. The report has been out for a while, and we would like to get some more review of that, particularly from people who were part of the workshop before publishing it as an RFC. There's a bunch of interesting, or hopefully interesting conclusions if you look at the slides on your own time or the report. And we actually identified some things that we later started doing at the IETF. Stephen will talk about one of those topics later in this session. But basically, please review, and we'll be publishing this in RFC soon. So I think that's it. Unless people have questions, we can move to the next one.
You want to skip all this, right? Okay.
Yeah, to the next presentation, yeah. Okay, so this is a proposed workshop that we are planning to have that, and that we are about to send the call for papers out in a few days. Unless it already went out, I'm not sure. And you can see the organizing committee here on the screen. And go to the next slide. Yeah, so the background for this is that, of course, we've been affected greatly by this COVID-19 pandemic, but it also has had an impact on networking. And we've seen ISPs and conversational multimedia systems and conferencing systems impacted, I would say, greatly. So it's been an interesting experiment also on the internet, and see what happened. It's been there's certainly some lessons to be learned. Many things change in terms of the traffic patterns. Also, organizations did things differently on the background or backside of it. We go to the next slide. So we would like to have a workshop that talks about the traffic patterns and their changes. We want to learn about that. We'd like to understand how the different operators and service providers responded, what kind of things they have to do. It's an opportunity for us to share our understanding or different people's understandings of what the impacts were, what was needed and what worked and what did not. And maybe also an opportunity to learn for the future. Next slide. So topics in scope for the workshop are measurements, discussion about the behind-the-scenes network management and other activities that have to be going on. Different experiences probably in when we talk about general network connectivity or conferencing systems or entertainment systems. We plan to separate those topics out a little bit. But we probably also learn some things or can learn some things for preparedness and operations, and possibly also for internet technology and architecture. So that I think would be an interesting thing to talk about. Like how can we adjust to adjust in the future even better? I think there's a reasonably well done performance from the internet, but we can probably improve even more. Next slide. So this is a virtual workshop, and as is usual for IAB workshops, we call for position papers. People can submit position papers, and these form like the, provide information for the participants and for others. And also is a reason for us to invite the set of people that have written the interesting papers. And then we'll have not just one session or not 1-2 day long conference call, but several sessions separated by the topics a little bit. So if you only know and care about conferencing systems, you can probably attend only that part if you really want to. And that will be in November. You can see the other dates on the screen. So that's basically it. We're setting it up, and expect to see the call for papers out soon, and would love to have people's participation in this and submissions and feedback as well. So that's it.
Thank you. We have DKG in queue.
Hello, this is Daniel Kahn-Gilmore from ACLU. I was a little bit surprised to see in your list of topics, which covers a fairly wide range, no mention of either the consolidation questions that we've been grappling with as an organization, and how those are impacted by the move towards everything being online and not in person, and questions around privacy and security, what trade-offs happen there as well. Are those just there by implication because we're always talking about all those topics, or is there a reason to not include them in the list of proposed topics?
I think those are really good points, and certainly impacts that we should think about. That sounds like a perfect topic for position paper or multiple papers. So I personally do hope that we get to discuss that topic also. I've been personally quite interested in that topic in other contexts as well. So certainly food for thought. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's also a question in the Java room why this is invitation only when it's a virtual meeting.
Yeah, it's a good question. We usually like to have or discussions are best had when you have very well informed participants and made sort of contributions that we verify by looking at the position papers. Now, I think given that we are virtual, my personal hope is that essentially we would have participants, and then you can sort of freely listen by anybody who's interested. I haven't discussed this with the other organizers, so I don't know how they feel about that. That's one potential thought, but it's a good point though. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe let me add that, I mean, it's not meant to be a barrier to participate. Please, if you're interested, just send some kind of paper, position paper. It doesn't have to be long. What we want to make sure is that we have a good group of people with a good discussion. And I think this is true both for in-person as well as virtual. If you have like a group of like hundreds of people, it's not the same discussion than if you have like kind of smaller group people where everybody has a well-defined opinion. So that's the goal here. Okay. Then thank you, Jari. Let's move on. Okay. I think, Stephen, I tried to accept your audio.
Yes. So, Stephen, we do have your slides already. I
Great.
don't think you need to request screen sharing.
Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Okay, and now it also shows everything right to me. Okay, so we move on to the third part here, which is reporting back a little bit about technical programs. We have one active program, which is the Internet Threat Model program, and that's why Stephen just joined the audio, because he will tell us a little bit about it. Also, we listed here some programs we closed recently last year. Just for your information, more information is also on the IAB webpage. And then after Stephen, we have Tommy, who will tell us a little bit about a new program we are discussing right now. But let's start with Stephen.
Hi. So in fact, there's not much to say, mostly because I did bugger all in the last period because I was basically busy elsewhere, so the usual excuse. However, other people have done a few things, and we hope to kind of get ramped up again this week and subsequently. So we had a good call on April 20th after, in the period of IETF 107. We're planning to do a virtual meeting soon, so there's a poll on the mailing list to organize one of those in August, September time, and trying to be friendly to our Australasian located people to whom we were unfriendly last time. And you have a link there to the charter and to the mailing list. We're considering the evolution of the threat model, possibly to offer an update to BCP 72 that the IETF might consider. And next slide. There's a bunch of drafts being considered that are being discussed on the list. I wouldn't say any of them are, completely finished or near it. People are discussing. There's overlap between these drafts, and that's okay. We may find some way during discussion to see how to proceed with them. We're also, at Yari's suggestion, going to try and see if people are around this week to just have an informal get-together on Thursday at 16:10 UTC. And again, details for that are on the mailing list. If you care to join, you'll be welcome. And that's totally informal, just to try and reboot ourselves after a period of inactivity. That's all I had. If anybody has a question or comment.
Yeah, we don't have anybody in the queue right now, but we can wait a little moment and see if anybody wants to join. And we have Dominic.
Let's see, can you hear me?
Yes.
Just thanks to Stephen for presenting this. And I just wanted to make a comment about the fact that there's been a lot of work done on all these drafts, and they're quite interesting. It'd be great to get as many people who are interested involved. So just a plug for the work that we're all doing on this. Thanks.
Thank you. We have one more person in the queue. Natalie.
Hi, everybody. Just a quick question on why there's the taxonomy for CLES in that list, but there's an actual draft on the endpoint security that's elsewhere. I think it's in SMART, which isn't really a thing anymore. So just wondering why that list is the way it is. Thanks.
That list of drafts is the list of drafts recently mentioned on the Model T mailing list. And none of these things has any particularly formal status. So anything like that would come later. So. It could be my omission. It could be that the author thought it was better elsewhere. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then let's move on. And now this is Tommy about what we have currently proposed as a program. You will tell more about it, Tommy. Go ahead.
Yes. All right. Thank you. So we did send out a note about this to the architecture discuss list. So one of the topics that we covered in our IAB retreat was just looking at what are the different architectural issues that we see right now. And a lot of the topics kept coming back to this common theme, which I'm trying to consolidate here as evolvability, deployability, and maintainability. And we're calling it EDM for short. And this is definitely related to work that's happened in the IAB previously. Most recently, we had the Stack Evolution group that was looking kind of specifically at how our protocols and the protocol stack that we're running on hosts is evolving, and making sure that we can make it extensible. The goal of this proposal is to kind of take that to its next step and look more at how do we actually apply these principles in the work that we do in the IETF, and also look at when we are kind of doing our practical work of designing the protocol and actually doing our work within the IETF and deploying, are there practices that we could have that would better ensure that our protocols are actually evolvable and create an architecture that scales up for this and doesn't end up being hampered by ossification because middle boxes aren't handling things correctly or implementations are stuck, or even just because we don't have enough insight into how things are actually working as we're designing protocols. So next slide. So just to talk about kind of what are the different topics that we think are in scope for this program. First, we have topics around evolvability. There was already a lot of work that's been done to try to document evolvability. Some of this is stuff that was in the previous programs we had, like the use it or lose it draft or the protocol maintenance draft. Both of these are ones that Martin Thompson worked on a lot. They have not been published as IAB RFCs, but I think there's a lot of great material in there that we want to draw upon or see these documents through to completion. We also see work going on in various working groups. Quick, of course, has a lot of focus on the notion of greasing to make sure that if you have an extensible point in your protocol, that it is used, and that can hopefully ensure that it can continue to be used for new purposes without becoming ossified. More recently, there's been a discussion and a new mailing list that was set up around HTTP greasing to try to do large-scale experiments to start greasing various fields and properties of HTTP to make sure that we don't end up with more ossification. So that's one aspect of evolvability. And as we see, that has to do a lot with what are the extension points to a given protocol. Part of this also then has to do with how do we communicate about these types of extension points. There are already IAB RFCs that talk about how to extend specific protocols, such as RFC 5507 on expanding DNS and talking about all the different options you have there and what is the best way to extend things. And I think this is a very interesting area, specifically when you're looking at protocol evolution, because you may have certain extension points that are preferred to try new things with. These are the points that should be greased. It also seems that in some protocols there are points that we know are very limited number spaces, let's say, or we already know that they are pretty much ossified and this is not the right point to extend your protocol with. Oftentimes this knowledge is not well documented, so I think there's room to both document this for existing protocols, but also try to get a practice of when we are writing and documenting protocols that we should be very explicit about every extension point, how we are making sure it's evolvable or how we are marking it as essentially a stable or ossified point. And if we see practices around wanting to encourage greasing, we need to make sure that the code point allocation practices that we are defining are appropriate for extensibility. So even recently, we've had discussions on, there's a new DNS record type for service binding type, or the HTTPS record. And in that, in order to become extensible, there was a lot of discussion around how do we move the IANA allocation to have much more first come, first serve room. Similarly, in quick since that is a very, very large space that it can do with variable length integers, you can have essentially first come, first serve, or just grab a random value, and that's how you make something extensible. We want to see more of that when it's appropriate. Next slide. So that was evolvability. The next part, deployability, is making sure that these things that we have in principle, in theory, are actually playing out when we are deploying our protocols. And ideally, we should know this before we actually publish our RFCs and know that these things are working and that they are going to work on the open internet. So this is a lot about how we do work in our working groups and trying to see if we can come up with good recommendations for how that can improve our overall protocol deployments and architecture. Various working groups are already doing a lot of this, but there's not a standard way, and this is something that may be very beneficial for the community. So we want to be able to catalog what are the different implementations that we have during development and after. What are the versions that are being supported as we are revving our documents? When we've done interoperability testing, are the results cataloged anywhere? Do we know, do the document authors for a protocol know what are these problems and issues that various implementations are hitting? And when we're actively running an experiment to try out a new code point on the internet and see if it's working, where are we able to share that information? So next slide. So as just some examples, various working groups are already doing this. Here is on the TLS GitHub page, a list of various implementations for TLS 1.3. And so this is an already published protocol, but you can see that we had various different versions being indicated by these implementations, and this was a useful catalog, and it still is a useful catalog to see where are the different places that implement this. Next slide. Quick has a great page also going over all of the different implementations it has and various ways to find public servers to test against. Next slide. And so those previous ones were kind of official working group lists that we had on the working group GitHub. We also see sometimes not that happening, not in an official working group GitHub, but just on a given document. So here's the example for the service binding HTTPS DNS record. Recently on the list, they advertised that they were on their GitHub page hosting a list of implementations, and people have started to fill that in. Next slide. And then on the interoperability standpoint, Quick, of course, has this great Google Doc that tracks all the interoperability results for various versions of the Quick drafts. And this is a really useful way to see how all the protocols are, all the implementations of the protocol are working together, what features they have, which ones are actually being tested. And this is great for the implementers, but it's also really useful for the people who are writing the protocols and making sure that we understand what is being tested. Now, the thing I'd like to point out here is all of these so far as examples have been either GitHub pages hosted by a working group, GitHub pages hosted for a specific document, or a Google Doc hosted for a specific working group. These aren't necessarily easy to find off of Data Tracker, and they're not, and more importantly, they're not easy to replicate if you are a working group that doesn't already have a lot of this infrastructure in place. But these types of tools are really important for actually making sure that the protocols that we're building as an IETF are deployable. So this is something that we can look at. Next slide. And then lastly, we want to talk about maintainability, of saying even after a working group has shipped its protocol, how do we make sure that the extension points that we have defined continue to be used correctly? How do these work? This is about supporting the community of implementers for a given protocol. A lot of this doesn't necessarily need to be done in terms of RFC content. Some of it certainly can be, but oftentimes it's maybe more appropriate to have wikis or FAQs. These are things that could be viewed as living documents, but they don't have to be even that formal. But having a place where people know to talk about a given protocol, given issues, would be useful. Earlier I mentioned there's the effort to try to do greasing for HTTP, and that requires some level of coordination within the community of implementers to know what types of headers are we going to grease today, what are we going to send at a different cadence. And this is something that's not really the best, it's not best suited for a normal working group that's about shipping documents, but it is still a function that the protocol experts and the community that comes out of a working group can be involved in. So we want to talk about what happens for these kinds of things that are going to go on beyond the length of developing a protocol. Next slide. And just as one example, the TLS working group's website, I think, is a really good example to look at. It links to a lot of different resources on their GitHub and has, beyond kind of the list of implementations, a lot of information about how do I do testing for my implementation, other kind of wiki resources. This is something that we'd love to see be a lot more easy for other protocols and working groups to be able to host. Next slide, please. So from a practical aspect, the different tasks that we want to do to start up the group, we're getting representatives from within the IAB, but also we've talked to the IASG about this, and we have various IASG members who want to be involved. If we want to be extending what is available in Data Tracker or other tools, we want a deep involvement from the tools team, as well as from the broader community who would be able to use these. We also want to, as a group, review what are the successful models we see in working groups for making sure that things are deployable and also extensible, and also look at the cases where we've seen struggles of defining a protocol and then after we've shipped the protocol realizing that it has some of these issues. Next slide, please. Specifically for the output of the group, the program can write documents. We may want to spin off some workshops if we see specific areas to look at, but we can also be building new IETF tools and then providing guidance back into the IETF, hopefully to indicate what we can do during IETF reviews as well as when we're doing working group work itself. And I think that's all the slides I have here. So any thoughts from the community would be fantastic.
Yeah, we have DKG again.
Hi there, this is DKG. I just put in the chat a pointer to a OpenPGP test suite, and that test suite is in part functioning as a result of a draft that I wrote that I've not even bothered to try to put into RFC status because the draft defines an API. And I know, everyone's hair stood up on the back of their neck when I said that, but I actually think that defining an API, trying to define a minimal API, that exercise was super useful in terms of thinking about what we want the high-level semantics of our protocols to be. And it also gives implementers something that they can work towards to hook into test suites. So I know that the IETF has traditionally not done that, but I wonder whether APIs aren't something that we should be thinking about. Maybe they're abstract APIs, maybe they're simple or implausible APIs for actual use. But I do find that it makes giving a simple API that people can understand both helps to clarify the goals of the protocol and helps to make interoperability test suites work.
All right.
And we have Dan York.
Hi, Tommy.
Hi.
Thanks for this. I think this is sorry. I am employed by the Internet Society, but not speaking for them. I think this is great because at the Internet Society, I've been involved in several projects where we've been trying to help people deploy protocols that have been developed by the IETF and done that. And the big challenge has often been that the only deployment advice that people are given is read the RFCs, and those don't necessarily help. So I think, well, some are not written in a way that necessarily the average implementer can necessarily understand what they actually need to go and do. So I think that a program like this could be useful. I think as I listen to what you're saying, I think it's important to differentiate between two parts. One is the great work that you've highlighted here in helping people develop the protocols while they're in development, and getting the implementation matrices, the hackathon work, the various different pieces there that help guide the authors in the development of that. And I think a lot of that can be found through things like the working group GitHub portals and the pieces like that. I think the challenge is what happens once the RFCs get published, and how do we help people once the protocols are out there? How do we help people with that deployment work, the implementation work? And I think one challenge there is just how do they find it? And I think it's very interesting what you're saying about linking into but I think that discoverability is a huge issue, because there's a ton of information about how to implement many of the different protocols that are out there, but it's all in different places. It has different, works for different operating systems. It's up to date at different levels. So helping get to a place where we have a defined set of test suites, reference documentation, or other that people can find, I think would be hugely helpful if we can get to that.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Yeah. So we are also nearly at the end of our session.
Yes. I'm sure I have open mic time.
Yeah, I really would like to get some more feedback from the community about the session in general or other topics you want to bring up. Let me say one thing before I go to Chris Wood, who's on the queue now. You didn't put on this slide that we already have a mailing list for this. So edm@iab.org is the place to provide more feedback, because I also see a lot of feedback in the Jabber. So I think there's broad interest, and the only remaining challenge is to figure out what we don't want to do first, I think. So yeah, but then let's have Chris quickly.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say I'm supportive of this program. As demonstrated by the screenshots, it's easy for different working groups to do different things, and it'd be nice if there was like a common way to specify and provide this information linked to it from the relevant protocol document to the working group. So whatever we can do to simplify that process for active protocol development would be absolutely lovely.
Thank you.
All right. We have one queue.
Yeah, we have Tollis and Ben in the queue. Not sure if they want to start the open mic or if it's still for the program, but I have Tollis next anyway.
Yeah, maybe a quick thanks a lot, Tommy, for starting this. I mean, this is a really big but important can of worms, and maybe one of the main issues is trying to figure out what the processes are to actually do these things, right? And maybe starting with experimentation of interested community members, but seeing how things can be professionalized, which might then cost, more development side on the tools team. So that meta discussion might help to actually get work started. Yeah, for the open mic stuff, and I sent that as mail already out before the session, right? So we think there is interest and need to investigate the encoding options of future network layer protocols beyond IPv6 extension headers. For example, to explore how to better leverage the evolving capabilities of programmable ASIC-based wide area network forwarding plane elements. And we brought this up with the IRTF chair, but he's already rejected these goals as appropriate questions for a research group. He thinks it's solely an engineering question. I do, of course, disagree, but I'd really like to hear the opinion of the IAB, what would be the right place to do this type of work in the community, given how it's meant to not immediately address possible standardization, but rather to examine feasibility and possible benefits, right? And a corollary of that is really, could the IAB maybe please present a short statement about how the IAB decides what workshops to run and when to start new programs, and then maybe, how the community could have an impact on that process. Thanks.
Yeah, let me quickly just say two things because I saw your email and we replied to it. So we are actually in the process of also discussing what programs are and how they should be. So hopefully we can provide you more information in the future, but I will also reply to your email. But like the general topic, I don't think we have time for it to discuss it right now, but
Sure.
I just put Colin in audio because I think he wanted to reply directly to what you said about the IRTF scope.
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, Turles and I had a brief conversation in the hallway at the Singapore IETF meeting.
Yes.
And what I actually said was that I didn't, that the discussion that, you know, but based on what I understood of what you said at the time, I didn't see any an appropriate research topic. Clearly, if you have a more detailed proposal, then or a proposal on a different topic, then obviously we would discuss it. But I think perhaps trying to claim the IRTF has refused a certain topic for all time based on a very short hallway conversation is perhaps overstating the case.
That's fine, thanks. And but I think the interesting question for me was when we had the discussion that I felt a little bit like architectural questions in general, and specifically for these type of, you know, maybe hardware-centric problems fall somewhere in a crack between a research question and what I consider to be engineering question. Maybe there is something to it, but maybe IAB has different opinions about that. So that's also part of the question.
Yeah, let's move this to the mailing list.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we have Ben, yeah. Oh, now I accepted Dominic as well, but let's go for Ben first, sorry.
I just wanted to answer your question and say that I enjoyed the session. I found it useful and informative. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Thank you.
On the EDM topic, I think I agree with Turles. It's especially for interactive test services, the idea of trying to set up and then maintain an interactive test endpoint, like example.com, indefinitely, is a daunting proposition. It would certainly help if ISOC or IETF somehow had support for that.
Thank you. So I will cut the queue because we're already over time, but we go for Dominique and then Jim at the end.
Thanks. Yeah, and I really appreciate the presentation, and yeah, definitely think the work is useful and be interested in participating about the deployability and endpoints as well. Just a quick question for the open mic. We've been discussing in the chat about the consolidation document, and Jari provided some comments on it, but I just wanted to see what the status was of that in terms of publication and future work. Thanks.
Yeah, the IAB didn't discuss this document specifically recently, but we're still discussing the whole topic on consolidation and what to do in that scope. So that's still on our agenda. So I mean, Jari's on the IAB, so he can bring it back up anytime. Okay, and then we go for Jim.
Thanks very much, Maria. I just want to say this has been a very useful and very, very informative session, and I hope we'll see more of these at future IETF meetings. I think it's also very good that we're then able to have more of a direct dialogue between, if you like, the participants in the IETF and the IB directly. And I think that's also a very valuable thing to do. So I would like to see more of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's very useful. If you have any more feedback, just send it to us directly at IAB@IAB.org or use the architecture discuss list, also for general topics you want to discuss. So I believe we do plan to have this again at some point. Yeah, this one was a little bit short in time, but this is because of the whole schedule as we have it right now. So let's see where we are next time and how to organize it. And that's the end of it, I think. Tommy, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and feedback, and we hope to keep up this open dialogue with everyone.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the week.